Welcome to the Darkstream. Vox Day, voxday.net, and unauthorized.tv. So we got the DLive chat rolling. We've got the unauthorized chat rolling. I'm assured that the audio and video are good, and super chats are live. So, as I explained last week, I haven't been streaming much because we've been very, very busy at the bindery, making good progress. I'll show you something here in a bit, but I want to first address the topic, which is SSH and War, Socio-Sexual Hierarchy and War. What does SSH have to do with war? Well, not necessarily much in most circumstances, but if you've noticed, there's something very strange about this particular conflict between nominally Ukraine and Russia. And the reason is that this is really not a war between two sovereign states. This is not a war between two nations. It's a war between the imperial ruling class of the West, which we call Clown World, and the independent sovereign nations of Russia, China, Iran, and probably a few other nations. And so if you look at the way that Clown World has advanced, if you look at the way that it's gone from being a non-entity to being a controlling factor of the most powerful military on the planet, it's utilized a very familiar form of technique, a series of techniques. If you look at the way that Zelensky and his supporters in the West behave, it's almost exactly like watching the Gammas in a junior high or high school. The constant playing the victim, the constant appeals to some invisible teacher figure who is somehow going to step in and set it all right. And what this allows us to do, once we see a reliable pattern at work, and there's no shortage of information from the Kiev regime, it becomes fairly obvious what their future decisions are going to be, or what their behavior is going to be when faced with certain decisions. So, what would you say is the next step that Ukraine, that the armed forces of Ukraine, that the Kiev regime with Zelensky, with the neo-clowns calling the shots, what's their next step? The counteroffensive has failed comprehensively. What looks to have been a very sad attempt at getting a mercenary company to change sides and institute a color revolution also appears to have comprehensively failed. The whole thing was, I don't know if it even lasted 24 hours. I did an interview with Piero San Giorgio today. I believe he'll be putting it up tonight, possibly tomorrow. And we discussed that in more detail, so I'm not going to go into any discussion of the coup or the attempted buyout of Wagner right now. But just as a reference, it took place. It clearly failed. Matt Jarbo says, reframe and redefine a loss as a win. Well, yes, they're absolutely going to do that. And they've already done that. they've said, well, we weren't really trying. We only lost 30% of the tanks we were given, so we weren't really trying. We didn't lose, we didn't try. We've already seen that. But what I mean is, and when I say what is going to be the next step, there's fundamentally two choices. There's fundamentally two big options right now. Number one, and these are things that have been discussed. These are things that have been openly suggested. One is some sort of nuclear false flag. That's what Idaho Crusader says. Escalate nuclear false flag. That's one possibility. And that is in keeping with what we know of gamma behavior. Doubling down, but not in a way that is direct and open, but rather creating the damage and then trying to blame it on Russia, just like we've seen with the pipeline, just like we've seen with the violation of the Minsk Accords. I mean, it's the same thing every time. Veritas Button English says the nuke plant, sabotage and blame Russia to get NATO involved. Yeah, that is one option. The other big option is the use of the missiles, the long-range missiles, the HIMARS and the Storm Shadows, which are from the US and the UK respectively, to strike Crimea. Now, it's enough of a potential threat that Shoigu and others have said that if that happens, they're going to use their own long-range missiles, and they're going to strike the decision-making centers in both Kiev and outside of Ukraine. So in other words, that's a direct threat that if US and UK long-range missiles are used to hit Russia proper, then they're going to hit the UK and they're going to hit the US proper. And I'm not worried about that. Why not? Well, if our read on the last 2 years of the situation is correct, then we can be pretty confident that they're going to stick with the gamma model. Going direct and risking Russia going direct is not the way that they've been playing this game so far. There's no way that they can launch Storm Shadows at Crimea, hit it, and then blame it on somebody else. That's a direct action. That's a direct attack. That's taking responsibility for your actions, and that's taking the risk of somebody punching you in the face. So I think we can be relatively confident that, given the fact that the leadership remains the same leadership, they're much more likely to go with the gamma method of some sort of false flag that they can then attempt to blame on someone else in order to score some imaginary points with a non-existent judge who isn't keeping score. Idaho Crusader is right. The greater American empire never enters a war that they can't try and claim being attacked first. Cringe-Gaiden has been certainly reading a few of the more esoteric sites. He says, Wagner attack Kiev from Belarus. I don't think that's likely. Some people have said that they think that this whole kerfluffle has been manufactured and that it was done in order to position Wagner to go up against Kiev. I don't think that's likely because I don't think that Kiev achieves anything significant. Maybe it gets NATO to pull the plug, but I don't think so. And Kiev is better defended than the Bakhmuts and so forth. So But if my read on the Wagner situation is correct, then, and I'm pretty sure that it's at least partially correct, because news has just come out that Washington and even the congressmen in D.C. knew about the Wagner quote-unquote coup a few days ago. So what that means is that it's pretty likely that Prigozhin was offered the 6.2 billion in order to change sides, and that there were other assets inside of Russia that were supposed to, rise up in support of him and that sort of thing. Obviously, it didn't work. Now, whether the whole thing was, some sort of feint or sham, and Prigozhin is actually a triple agent, I mean, at a certain point, you just have to say, look, we have no idea. But I think if you're positing a triple agent, you're probably not going to be correct. Jordan says, Russia's probably perfectly happy to keep draining NATO and stomping subversives for a while. I think that's generally true. But I think that the time is coming where it's going to be obvious that the benefits are declining. I mean, there's going to be, at some point in time, there's going to be that point at which NATO says, look, we're just not going to waste any more of our assets here. Maybe the defense contractors love it because they can sell more. But, America, well, not America, but the United States is running into resource issues. And this is obvious. And also, the situation with China is getting worse thanks to the Biden regime's inability to remain diplomatic. And so, we'll just have to wait and see. We have no vote. We have no voice. All we can do is pay attention and see what's coming. If this SSH model is appropriate here, then what we can expect is the next major event coming out of there is either going to be some sort of Russian offensive, probably directed at Kharkov. A number of people have said that once Kharkov is taken, the war is over. I don't believe that, because this is not a war between Ukraine and Russia. This is not a war for the liberation of the Donbass. That's just one step in a much larger conflict. And so, if you look at the way that the situation is evolving, either we're going to see a Russian offensive, or we're going to see a Ukrainian false flag, probably aimed at a nuclear, I think it's called the ZNPP. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the actual name. Is it possible to remove and relocate nuclear rods from the Zaporizhia, I'm just going to say the ZNPP plant, to take that option away from Ukraine? Well, not entirely. We're not looking at a Chernobyl situation, just to be clear. There's not, the plant has already been put into what they call cold storage. The whole thing is not going to go boom. And that's another indication that the false flag is going to be the choice it's made, because people don't understand the difference between Chernobyl, Hiroshima, whatever happened in Japan, and what might happen in Ukraine. It's just nuclear plant bad. And again, the entire focus of the Kiev regime has been on the public arena. So they're happy to attempt to fight the war in that arena. Now, we know that it's repeatedly proven irrelevant, but this is a strategy that has worked effectively for, at the bare minimum, decades. This whole cry and point fingers and call names has been very, very effective for the past 70 years, maybe longer. And so if you've got a strategy that's been working for 70 years, you're not going to give it up just because it doesn't work a few times. Which means that they got away with blaming the dam on Russia. That was absurd, but the Western media still claims that. They still try to claim that Russia blew up its own natural gas pipeline. Total nonsense, but it more or less worked. And so I think that we can assume that they're going to keep doubling down on the management of the public arena space. That's their primary battle space, even though it's proven repeatedly irrelevant in the last 2 years. So now let's move over to talking about the bindery stuff. Just one reminder, we're coming up on the last week that you can order the Castalia History Book 1 as part of your subscription. And so I would encourage that. Let's back up for a second. Yordamon says, Poland is also announcing that fallout on their territory equals an active war on all of NATO. Right, so I'm sure that all of NATO is going to declare war on Kiev after they do their false flag, right? No, and there's already, the U.S. Congress, Lindsey Graham, the senator, is making noise about, how Russia's going to do this and how the U.S. has to respond to any attack on a power plant and all this sort of thing. So the groundwork is being laid. It's not just the SSH read that indicates the next step is going to be a false flag. It's very clear they're laying the media groundwork, they're laying the public groundwork. So I would guess that within the next 2 weeks, we'll probably see the attempted false flag. Obviously, Russia's going to try to stop it. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. But, so we're now at the point where I don't have I'm not going to go into much detail tonight because I'm hoping that I'll have some examples to show you tomorrow. But what I can show you tonight is to talk about our success with the foil stamping. Now, this is one of our more popular books, Ethics by Aristotle. It's goat skin. It's very nice. It's very pretty. And it's got this beautiful gold foil stamping. Now, what you might not notice, I'm not sure that the camera will really get this across, but the stamping of the titles is very pretty, but it's not necessarily quite as clear and as sharp as we might like. So look particularly at that Libraria Castalia there. You can see that the letters are clear and they're readable, but they're not necessarily quite as sharp as one might like. Now, these are the books that are produced for us in the US bindery. Now, this is literally the first stamping on goat skin that we did at the bindery. And what I think you'll see if you look closely is look at how sharp, look at how very sharp and clear that stamping is. And so, we've got two of the world experts and the guy who is probably the world expert on these machines, who have been training our guys in. And this was not done by him. This was actually done by our lead guy, who's been trained in. And so what this means is that we're already getting not just good, not just sufficient, but we're already getting superior results on our leather stamping on the foil. And so, this is, I think, excellent news. I mean, it was really, really difficult, as you know, for us to even get that machine in the bindery. It's now in there. We're now using it. We're really able to do precision work of the sort that we hope we'd be able to do. Cactus Eater Bear says, since the stamping game is strong, will the Iliad and the Odyssey be more detailed? Almost certainly. Almost certainly. We're learning a lot about how things should be done. We're learning a lot about how the current market leaders, being essentially a monopoly, have been cutting corners and not necessarily doing things that should be done if you want absolutely top results. I mean, on the one hand, this is a little bit disappointing because we wanted to already be doing the best possible work, right? On the other hand, now that we have our own bindery, it's actually nice to know that we can not only meet but exceed the standard that's already been set. The current standard that we've got is really good. It's excellent. It's better than Easton Press. Some even think that it's better than Franklin was. But now we're beginning to see some of the rewards and results from our focus on quality. This is not bad. This is absolutely superior. If you compare this to Franklin Library, if you compare this to Easton, you compare it to Jean de Bonneau, it's excellent. But this is better, and I'm very optimistic about being able to. Today, we were actually going all weekend, and I'm going to be able to show you some stuff that literally hasn't been done before. We're actually inventing new techniques that nobody's ever done in this type of binding, in this type of deluxe binding. Shrinkflation should not enter into the leather-bound book business. No, absolutely it shouldn't. But the problem is that, it's the usual problem. Whenever you have a successful business and it gets bought by financial corporations that don't really care about the quality, there's always going to be pressure to reduce the quality, increase the margin. And the bindery that we use, even though it's been around for 40, 50 years, it was purchased like 10 or 12 years ago by a financial company in Ohio. And we've seen some of the results, we've seen some of the things that they've changed over the years, from what they were doing before to what they're doing now. And that's the way it is. So that creates an opportunity for us. Jordan says the quality ceiling is so much higher than we knew. Exactly. We didn't even know it was going to be possible to do some of these things. And what we're doing now, one of the things that I've been doing is going out and buying old leather-bound books simply for the quality of the binding. Just so we can see some of the different things that people do, that people have done to make sure that we have those options. And I do have, I'm happy to be able to say that we have our first client. In fact, I actually have to get the contract written up here after this stream is over, get it out tonight. So, and we're going to be doing some simpler things, and then we'll be ready to tackle the Iliad and the Odyssey. We're not going to jump on those right away because we want to make sure that we get all of the techniques ironed out and can deliver something that's going to be truly exceptional. That's the objective. So anyhow, so tomorrow night we're going to do I'm going to stop now because tomorrow night we're going to talk about the bindery, and I'm going to show you a number of things that I think you will find very exciting. So in the meantime, have a good rest of the weekend. Get fired up for Monday. Hit it hard. And we'll see you tomorrow night. I'm Vox Day. This is the Darkstream.